In southwest China, at the foothills of the Himalayas, in the shade of the snow-covered peaks of Kawakarpo, stretches a vast steep territory on the Tibetan border known as the Tibetan Alpine Steppe. This region, south of Yunnan province, is one of the most inaccessible and surprising regions of China, fed by 3 major rivers, including the majestic Mekong. A mosaic of ethnic groups, including Tibetans, coexist in the mountainous folds of these large rivers with fertile banks. Convinced that in this magnificent landscape, they have found a unique terroir in China to make wine. Some great wine and spirit groups have settled there with the ambition to practice a viticulture of excellence. Their aspiration cohabitates with that of the simple local Tibetan peasants who practice polyculture and who have cultivated grapes since the arrival of missionaries more than a century ago. It's in Setsong, in northern Yunnan, that Hongxi and his family live in harmony between growing crops and livestock. Hongxi inherited the passion for winemaking from his father, who was one of the first Tibetans of Setsong to produce wine.
I'm going to the vineyard. We'll meet after.
Okay, I'll finish with the cows. Hongxin's vineyard is planted on the right bank of the Mekong River, where the first vines appeared 100 years ago. In combination with the family farm, a small acre of vines mingles with other crops.
As you can see, in the middle of my vines, I plant vegetables for our own consumption. Pumpkins, eggplants, peppers. In fact, I work in a large garden. It all started with my father, who wanted to plant these vines. But this year, they're not giving a big harvest. The quality of the wine is mediocre because of the weather. I will have to find another solution to make good wine. At this altitude, I have to pack my grapes in sacks to protect against insects that proliferate with moisture. In our region, the grapes ripen early, too early, in August, and unfortunately, the grapes fall during the rainy season. In these circumstances, I often call for outside help. I need advice to know how to treat the vine more easily, because it's prone to diseases brought on by the moisture and rain. I can't do it all alone.
For centuries, Tibetan farmers have considered nature as a whole, where plants, crops, and animals interact. Hongxin is aware of the great opportunity to improve his daily life by making wine. His valley has some natural assets to help them succeed. The vineyards like to grow on these lands dominated by the Mekong. Sensitive to extreme temperatures, the vines benefit from the presence of the river, which tempers the differences between daytime and nighttime temperatures normally present in higher altitudes. It's in following the meanders of the Mekong that French missionaries arrived 150 years ago with the first vines. In 1865, The people of Setsong see the arrival of French Catholic missionaries who will settle permanently in the region. With the help of the villagers, the priests build the village's church, now the capital of Catholicism in China. The French missionaries have now disappeared, but 80% of the inhabitants of the village remain Catholic. Historian and essayist Xiaoling is the last to remember this story. Like all the villagers, Xiao carries a middle name, François, that of his baptism. Every Monday, he comes to pray at the tomb of Father Ouvrard, one of the first missionaries of Setsong.
I come here often. In front of the tomb of Father Ouvrard, one of the first missionaries in the region. Before the tomb was built, I came here every Sunday to pay homage to him. To pay homage to him because for me it was like paying tribute to my father. Because my father came here with him, he studied with the missionaries. Even at 89, I still think of him.
Xiao's father was a Latinist. He was of great help to the priests, who arrived after a long journey without knowing the Tibetan dialect. The missionary fathers gradually found their place and evangelized these traditionally Buddhist populations. In order to perform their religious services with wine, they planted vines around the church and used a grape variety brought from Europe, the honey rose.
Life was very hard for the first missionaries who arrived in the area. The French missionaries arrived in China by two different routes. The first passed through the Suez Canal, and the second passed through Vietnam, which at that time was a French colony. From Vietnam, the missionaries took different directions. Some went to Sichuan, some to Burma, and some to China. Those who came from China had to go through Nepal on horseback, on the famous tea route, and they ended up in Setsong along the river. So the vines that are here have come by two different routes thanks to the missionaries.
Amen.
High above the clouds, at over 2,000 meters in altitude, Xiaoling, literally Crete above the clouds, is the name of a wine estate that is part of the tradition of foreign missions. Its origin, a French Christian association called the Paths of the Sky, that came here around 2000 to help the Tibetans improve their lives. In Xiaoling, about 30 Tibetan winemakers, organized in cooperative, sell the grapes they grow on their land, rent their plots, or help with the work of the vineyard. At the head of Xiaoling, Bertrand Christot, a businessman exiled in China for 20 years. With his winemaker, Mu Chao, an enologist trained in France, they oversee the harvest.
They were making wine here before we arrived, but it was more like vinegar, because they were using the methods the missionaries had taught them. After generations, the methods get lost, so finally, they didn't know how to do it anymore. They used a very rustic method, without any equipment. Now their wine is a little better, and we hope that it will become even better, and that one day it'll be the same as good quality French wine.
It's better to take care of the top leaves. First, they're bigger, and it's less likely to break the lower ones or hinder the next cut. We work with the peasants, who are also the owners of this land. They do the work, and we explain how to do it well. For example, how to cut the plant, the pruning, and the trimming. In other words, we take care of all the details, from the vineyard to the cellar.
After the harvest, the peasants come together to sort the grapes by hand. The atmosphere is relaxed. The watchful eye of Mu Chao oversees the rigorous operation. The peasants are aware of the harvest's importance, and they adapt easily to the requirements of this new agriculture.
When I arrived, the villagers lacked organization in growing their vines. It took me a long time to teach them professional methods. They had to acquire the notion of time and the rigor, and finally learn to cultivate the vines.
For Bertrand and his cellar master, the ambition is to produce an even better wine. The goal is also to provide villagers in Setsong a worthy income in this particularly poor region of China. During the harvest period, Bertrand Christot regularly visits his friend Hongxin, whom he advises, as he used to do with his father, who passed away.
Shall we look at your jars?
Yes, I have to show you. Look, that wine's from last year. The bottom jars contain Cabernet Sauvignon, and those are rose honey. I like this variety, but I can't treat it. I will stop growing it. This year, I can't get a quality wine because of too much rain. I feel like they've all gone bad. I want you to see that one.
Show me. Is this the one that fermented?
Yes, that's the one.
Indeed, it's very odd. There's a problem, it's obvious. Look, first it seems to me that sulfur dioxide needs to be added, otherwise it would be risky. I'd also add it to the rose honey wine. We'll try it tomorrow. I'll bring test tubes to measure the concentration. But you can't leave your wine like that. You have to be more vigilant and maybe diversify your grape varieties. So you add the sulfur without delay, and don't worry. I'll be back.
Come, let's have a drink. We're going to open this bottle.
2016.
A friend made the label for me.
Open it.
Not bad.
Ah, it smells good. I'm very happy to share this wine with you. I remember my arrival in the region. It was you who welcomed me. I love this place.
Good health.
Thank you.
That we continue to work together. That's what I wish for.
It's very good. If your father was still alive, He'd be very proud that his children were able to produce a fine quality wine like this.
It's thanks to you, Bertrand. Thank you for your help.
You know, this is the last wine that I made with my father.
And together we'll work to make the best wine in China.
Good health.
After miraculously taking root in this end-of-the-world region for the last 10 years, Tibetan viticulture has been writing a new page in its history. The valleys have seen the arrival of new Westerners, convinced to have found a unique terroir nestled in the hollow of these mountains. A Buddhist village 50 miles north of the village of Setsang has become home to the other great vineyard in the region. Their largest domain is held by an important French group. During the harvest period, its director, Maxence Doulou, takes a winding road to get to his vineyard lands.
We went around China for 4 years, and we realized that there were very few soils that corresponded to our aspirations. To make a great wine, fine, elegant, and fresh, we realized we had to look further, and finally we found this place. And for us, there are very few places in China that can make very great wine. The road is very complicated, quite dangerous, because the mountains are very steep, very young, not yet stabilized. So when there's heavy rain, we have landslides. Last month, part of the road was closed for 3 weeks because part of the mountain collapsed on the road. So there is an extraordinary adventure here, but it is dangerous. Anyway, that's what makes me love it. I'm not someone who can stay in his comfort zone. I need to go out to meet new cultures, new places. So finally, it suits me well.
Aoyun, which in Tibetan means flying above the clouds, surprises with the architecture of its cellars. The means deployed by the group to produce a wine of excellence contrast with the simplicity of the winemakers in the region. Every 2 weeks, Maxence comes to find his vineyard manager, David, a Chinese man who studied oenology in France and who manages the fields. David is waiting impatiently for Maxence's opinion to determine the date of the harvest.
So what do you think of the pep, David?
Yeah, it's really brown.
It's ready?
Yeah, I think so. And what's the color of the skin?
Yeah. It's
a very complex terroir. We have 314 parcels on 28 hectares, and these parcels are very heterogeneous because the soils are soils of mountain scree. For example, if you have adjacent plots, which are terraced on the mountain, here we have the Mekong, here we have the mountain, and between this row up the mountain and this row in the valley, we have climate differences, with more or less drying out, and differences of water reserves in the soil, because the pebbles are more or less numerous. So we adapt to optimize the management of this vine, which is up the mountain, and which will be completely different from the vine in the valley. So from the size until the harvest, we will work precisely and differently on these different terroirs.
In this unique vineyard, the villagers are an integral part of the estate's success. They know the techniques of farming without machines by heart. Without them, it's impossible to cultivate the vines. As they ready for the grape harvest, Maxence and David know that they will once again have to deal with an incredible diversity of population and their rather versatile characters.
Every day we bring villagers to work in the vineyards. There are different ethnic groups in our fields, each with its own culture. And of course, we have to deal with these cultural differences. For example, Tibetans organize cow races in the autumn, and many of the villagers leave to attend the races. So it happens that we lack manpower during these periods. I get together with them, and I make them understand that the vines will not wait. It's important for them and for us.
We work with 120 Tibetan families. There are potentially 2 people per family, so that's 250 people working on these 28 hectares. It's unique. And why? Because we do everything by hand. We are lucky to work with people who understand the plants and animals perfectly. These people have been here on this land for centuries and live in harmony. There is a harmony between the plants and animals. Each villager will have some walnut trees, a few vines, some plots of corn and barley, and these plants will feed their animals, yaks, and black pigs and chickens, etc. And the animals will feed the plants. There is a virtuous circle that existed 100 years ago in Europe and still exists here, and we try to maintain it.
Since the foreigners arrived, they've taught us how to work the vines. They told us how to keep them clean, and many other things. Before, we earned very little money selling our grains. Since the arrival of the foreigners, we have learned to better manage our crops. Today, thanks to them, we have as much work as we want, and we can make more money. As the harvest ends, Maxence and his team organize a celebratory meal in Yongsan, a small village on the edge of the estate. For these Chinese and Tibetan families, this is the first harvest festival in their history. In the traditional Tibetan house of the village chief, the courtyard becomes a large kitchen where the famous kongpo, the Tibetan dish made with yak, simmers in anticipation of the festivities.
Attention, please. The boss has a few words to say.
First message, thank you to participate to this season, to manage the vineyard. We do this party at the end of harvest, okay, like in France. In France, when we finish the harvest, we do a party because we are happy that we harvest the fruit to make the wine. Thank you.
It's important to have a party after working well. It's a reward, and it's a moment of communion. We get to know them a little bit. David is mostly in touch with them. David is the manager all year long, so it allows me to be with them a little more and understand them better.
As the party continues, the songs of the villagers rise above the Himalayas. True to their roots, the Yunnan Tibetan people are writing new pages in their wine history. It's a time which sees the mingling together of a farmers' cooperative and large foreign groups investing to produce exceptional wines. Driven by the main theme of this great wine epic, Hong Xin, Bertrand, Chao, Maxence, and David share a common desire to create the best wine of the Middle Kingdom.